Welcome back to Flavored Enemy Behind the Screens. I'm the DM over at Flavored Enemy, and today we're going to be talking about suspense and horror and how to implement those two things into your campaigns. Today with me, I've got the GM Cam. Cam, could you guys tell a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, my name's Cam. I'm one of the GMs over at Full Round Action Gaming. We mostly run Pathfinder 1 First Edition, but I have played in 5e a bit too. But our Thursday stream is basically running through all the adventure paths in chronological order. We just finished up Rise of the Runelords, and we're currently in Curse of the Crimson Throne. We just had our first session. And then Wednesday is my homebrew campaign called The Last Hopers, which is kind of like a Suicide Squad esque theme of a bunch of bad people getting gassed by a powerful wizard and being sent to go out and help people like a panopticon.
That honestly sounds like it'd be a lot of fun to play in.
Yeah,
Yeah. So today's theme we're talking about like suspense and horror, and as a DM, that in my experience, this is one of the more difficult things to implement in a real sense. To actually
absolutely.
instill that sense of suspense and horror and dread in a campaign, and sometimes it comes off as like a
Corny.
joke or
Yeah.
laugh or corny. Yeah, exactly. So like for example, like, how do you get past that corniness factor personally?
A lot of it is going to, for me, comes from like talking to my players and being like, hey, I know we joke, but this is a serious moment. I want you to like really imagine this in your brains. Like, don't, flip off with humor. Like, don't turn that part of your brain off to like cope with it. Like, really, like, be in this moment with me, because otherwise it's not going to work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I could see that definitely planning ahead of time and like implementing the fact like, hey, this is what we're heading into, kind of thing, can definitely help. I know, like for instances from me, one of the things that I did is for sense of like suspense and dread is I am a big fan of the fact that when you're using your wordage and your verbiage to describe settings or scenarios, the term less is more really applies.
Yeah,
So when you're describing things, keep it very vague, keep it very, very minimalistic, you know. And then also when you're going into descriptions on things that are ominous naturally, throw a little bit more description in there. So like doors,
yeah,
windows, chests are automatically ominous because you don't necessarily know what's on the other side or inside of it.
absolutely. Yeah,
So when you start describing those things, throw in a little bit more description in there, so now all their attention's focused there.
yeah. And like, just also the pace and cadence of the way you talk can help a lot, because if you talk very slowly it forces them to pay more attention to you, but then like if you can start speeding up you can create a sort of anxiety that keeps them like going and more intrigued and like pulls them in a little more too.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. A lot of theme and as far as emotion that you're trying to convey in a particular scene comes down to how you say it as well.
Yeah,
You can deliver the line of the doorway seems empty versus the doorway seems empty.
absolutely. Like your tone and cadence like will mess with players heads more than almost anything else you can do.
I agree. I agree. So in terms of like when you're handling DMing or GMing horror centric monsters, for example, like vampires, zombies, ghosts, those kinds of things. How do you handle their approach to what is essentially combat, or how do you handle them as an entity within an encounter?
It depends on the creature involved. Like a vampire is going to be more behind the scenes. They'll know the name and they'll see calling cards of the creature, but they shouldn't come into direct conflict with them too many times, because vampires are like known for enthralling people, right? They're known for getting other people to do that work, and that should be like you should really ratchet up the tension of like, is this person working for a vampire? Are we accidentally giving away like information that's going to get back to them?
Mm.
Whereas zombies is letting them walk into a room and then completely surrounding them, and then just like,
Yeah.
like even if they're like, you want to go the one hit route, like, okay, another one comes up, another one comes up, and it's just a relentless amount of just pressing in, even if they're not necessarily hitting them or doing a whole lot of damage. It's just like keeping them bunched up into one little area. And then
Yeah.
ghosts, just out of nowhere, basically. Like, I personally think ghosts are the most terrifying when they're just a jump scare, basically. Like, you walk into a room, bam, it's a haunt. Here's a ghost.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree. Um, now, for me, like whenever I use ghosts in particular, the ghost side of things, um, I love the kind of like the disconnect that they have with the world in itself. So, um, one of the things that I like to do is, you walk into like a room where a ghost was. That room is not going to be situated in the same way that it was when the ghost was alive. So, sitting in midair,
Yeah,
or
that's good
or
stuff.
like or like walking through a table that is there now.
Yeah, they
Um,
moved after they died.
exactly. So I like using situations like that where it's like it falls into this pattern of routine. Now, if I'm gonna have a ghost be prevalent for a while, right, to kind of like give a little bit of backstory and the story centric side of like the adventure or whatnot, I love having these ghosts kind of just repeating this pattern, right? Continuous pattern, get the party used to the pattern, and then when it breaks the pattern, all of a sudden they're on edge,
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
you can kind of implement that into either a jump scare or into just tonally shifting it to where it's a little bit more on edge.
Yeah.
Um, so now, like in terms of transitioning into the horror and suspense, because obviously when you're talking about a horror or suspense session, it's not going to immediately jump right into suspenseful.
Yeah.
How do you make that progression into a suspenseful moment?
Uh, that is honestly the hardest thing for me. Just because like you said, that transition is hard. I usually just try to go with like, things aren't where you remember they were. You go back into the room, something's not there again, or something new is there, and just, slowly fucking with the players. As like, I'm sorry, am I allowed to swear?
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. And then just like, messing with them, just like pushing them to, like, keep going in, and like, just, like, okay, are you sure you want to open that door? Just like little things like that that I don't normally do, because most of the time, it's they walk up to the door, make a perception, like, but when you start asking them like, are you sure you want to do that, or you should like, changing the way that you ask the question can also like create that, because like horror is mostly just anxiety and suspense, like, just, putting them on edge that way through like asking more questions than you normally do, or asking fewer questions than you normally do if you normally ask a lot. Like, that's the best
Yeah.
that I can come up with.
Yeah, no, I'm honestly right there with you. The only thing that I've noticed that I do differently in terms of that goes, and I'm a huge fan of just kind of like making that gradual ting in the bag, like you were saying. I'm a big
Yeah.
fan of that. But like another thing that I like to do is um just sneak in the elements of suspense and horror as a progression. For example, um, the parties, sitting at a table eating before the adventure, and they bring out the food, and the fighter
Like,
goes to scoop up a piece of rice, looks at it, and for a second they look like maggots, and then it's back
uh,
to rice.
yeah.
And then it's just tiny little tendrils of things that happen just to get them into that mindset.
Like, there's like the candles blow out, but there's not a draft.
Exactly.
Yeah,
very little things that just kind of like start to send that like a drip that turns into a water.
yeah. Like they build on top of each other.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, so as far as handling light versus dark when it comes to suspense and horror, how do you handle the clerics and paladins in the suspenseful and horror situations in terms of like they usually are like I'm talking about the lawful good and
Oh yeah.
like the
Like
good aligned
absolutely. Like
light bearing
paladins.
clerics.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
paladins in first edition are just straight up immune to fear. Like straight
exactly.
up. So it's like, well, this is good. So like, in situations like that, I like to like describe like their holy symbol going cold and just like making them feel like their god has abandoned them in this place. And
Mhm.
just like really ratcheting that up, like you don't feel the sun on your face anymore, like you are in this. And like on a certain level, like the game that I play, like paladins, like should not be fearless. Like that's part of their role play is like they should be. So, but then you kind of rely on them to like because they are so fearless, it makes they like kind of are supposed to like take more risks, and that
Yeah.
makes the rest of the party anxious on behalf of that because like nobody wants to be the coward standing next to a brave man in a foxhole type of thing.
Oh yeah. Mhm.
Like when you have a
Yeah.
paladin that's like, no, we're kicking in the next door, and then the rest of the party's like, no, 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 no. Like that honestly can help build that
I
sense of
agree.
dread because yeah, so just like
Because
fueling that
yeah. I mean, it's the party playing off of each other as well. You
was
know.
worked for me.
Exactly. One of the things that I do for Chrysanthia and Vittoria, my world, is kind of a long story short. The healer, who is a goddess of health and hearth, heals adventurers in their dreams, which is why adventurers heal with a full night's sleep, right?
Okay.
But there are areas that are so touched by dark magic, aka vampire lairs, places like that, that she cannot reach. So in places like those, you don't gain no benefits from long rests or short rests
Oh,
of the
you don't even
healing
get your
property,
spells back.
or
Oh,
no
you don't
spell
get
slots,
spells.
no healing,
Oh, that yeah, that would work
and
very well.
it really lays on that sense of dread
Yeah,
because there's no respite in the middle there.
yeah,
You're gonna have to keep from point A to point B. You're gonna have to manage your resources if you have the healing potions and such.
absolutely.
And I've noticed that small change took my suspense up to like 11.
Oh yeah, the second you don't let your players get their goodies back, they're like, oh no, they lose it. That's when like, oh, the
Yep.
mechanics match the role play. Yeah.
Mhm. Yep. Um. So, what's one instance where you could think of within a campaign that you either been a part of or GM or DM'd that you recall that being particularly suspenseful or horror centric, and why do you think that was?
So in the last Hopers campaign, like the the summoner, which is a class that summons creatures, she has an eidolon that basically molds onto her, and so when I heard that, I just started doing like a little bit of body horror of like I don't know if like you do any sort of content warnings for this kind of stuff, but like heads up, like fingernails falling out and her teeth falling out and new ones coming into the place as this creature, like this ectoplasm being just burst forth from her skin, tearing out, and just like as that like kept going, becoming a theme throughout the campaign. At a certain point, she went from neutral evil to neutral, and the Eidolon wasn't about that. Slithered off her body, leaving her bleeding and in terrible danger, and slithered over to a skeleton that the other player was controlling, and just became a part of that, and then teleported out. And players were like, "What the hell?" Like, just completely lost their stuff. But yeah,
Oh, that's a really good one. I oh that would oof.
yeah.
Um uh,
That's probably my proudest suspense and horror moment. I don't normally go into them too much because it's definitely not my strong suit. I can do body horror really well, but like my players like to joke a lot, so it's hard to really get
yeah.
them into suspense.
Yeah, I mean, what player doesn't like to joke a lot?
Yeah.
I have, I can't say my biggest one because I
Spoilers.
honestly don't. No, I honestly don't
Oh,
feel
okay.
like if I put my biggest horror one on here, that many people will be very happy with me.
Oh,
Um,
God.
but my second best one, I had this small party of four traveling through a swampy area, right?
Yeah.
Um, and they approached this small little like hut on stilts in the swamp, looking for respite because they were just in this absolute trudging, moving like maybe 10 feet every minute,
Oh,
just trudging
God.
through this muck,
Yeah.
waist deep and everything. The gnome was having to ride on the shoulders of the human. It was
Yeah.
bad. Um, but they got to this place, and obviously, singular house in the middle of the swamps. They're already sketched out.
Yeah.
There's nothing else there. It's just this small house, and there is a small lantern out front with on a small little table with two rocking chairs beside, and an old woman and an old man sitting on these rocking chairs. And when they get inside, the old woman and old man are not surprised whatsoever. Saying, "Oh, do you need some food, some place to rest, maybe?" And they accept, still sketched out, and get them some food, right? And they're
Yeah.
resting. And the old man, as they're getting ready to go to sleep, the old woman goes upstairs, and the old man looks at the party and says, "Whatever you do, don't open the front door, no matter what you hear." And he goes and sits out front on the patio while they go to sleep. Well, one of the party members, obviously curious as
Yeah.
hell, opens the front door in the middle of the night because he hears the sounds of whispering at the door. Don't ask me why he opened the door. If you're a D&D player, you know why you opened the door.
Yeah.
And he didn't see anything. The old man was sitting there, just mouth open, and this giant toad tongue out of the mouth, laying on the body all the way to the floor. And he's creeped out, closes the door quietly, right?
Yeah.
And then lays back down, goes back to sleep. Doesn't want to think about that anymore. And when they wake up in the morning, right? His face is all wet with swamp water. He doesn't know why. Cut every night after that session. He wakes up with swamp water on his face. No idea why. And every time he wakes up, he's missing one less spell slot than he went to bed with, slowly losing it.
Yeah.
And the premise of it, because this is like a long story short, they basically it was this swamp hag who was draining his spell slots from him, and every night would just stand above his body while he slept, draining the spells from him.
Yeah.
And just the waking up with the swamp water on the face. I would describe while he's sleeping that he would just hear the sounds of dripping water around him. Just little things like that.
Yeah. God.
Yeah.
No thanks. I wake up and I've drooled on myself and I'm already like, oh, this is a bad night. Waking up with swamp water. Ugh.
So, in terms of like setting up red herrings in your horror and suspense campaigns and sessions, are you more for it or against it?
Neither. I think it depends on if it serves the story or not, right? Like, I know it's kind of a cop-out answer, but like, if the bait and switch is going to have a higher impact than just the sense of dread and confronting it, you should do it. But if you don't think you can land the red herring in a meaningful way, don't do it. What do you think, though? Like, are you pro or against?
So I am typically pro red herring. I'm a big fan of using it, especially when there are multiple that make sense and nobody knows who to trust, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, I love playing into the role play centric side of, gathering information from everybody, trying to figure out who's doing this, who's doing that. You never know who you can trust. Everyone's hiding something, so any investigation checks to determine whether or not they're hiding something determines that they are hiding something at
Yeah.
least. Um, and it turns it into a very very suspenseful. Every conversation, every bit of dialogue is weighed and measured.
Have you ever
Um,
done the one where you have like 4 NPCs for them to interact with, and like the players are trying to figure out who is the bad one, and each one of the NPCs has something negative to say about the other one, but then they're all in it together.
I don't think I've ever heard of that one.
Yeah, it's just like, because then like the players, like they think they figure out who the one person is, so they get the other NPCs to go help them, like, let's go take him down, we figured out who it is, and then the other 4 just like, welcome to the ritual, like, start stabbing.
On the one where on the like a horror type one shot where I gathered up 6 party members. I had them each roll a d6, right? And then no matter what they told me, I said, all right, you're not the doppelganger.
And then
And then
yeah,
I put all of them in a mansion with a ghost, and the ghost would making things go wrong, but it was more like a poltergeist ghost where you couldn't see it.
yeah,
And so one of them they thought was the doppelganger because of that, because of the inbred meta knowledge there. And it turned it into this whole questioning all the player characters, because one of the things that kind of sucks in terms of like tabletop role-playing games versus movies and fiction and that kind of things is that typically you can trust your party.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so funny you made the comparison to like movies and TV, because like, I don't know about you, but like I roll all my dice out in the open, so there's times that I wish that I could just lie, but like, since they can see my rolls, like, that's the story the dice tell. Like, it takes a little bit of agency out of my hands, but I think that sometimes like the dice take it in more interesting ways than if I did hide or fudge.
Yeah, I agree that displaying your die rolls does have its merits. I'm more of the behind the screen kind of person, and that's not so much about fudging rolls, because I don't think I've ever really fudged a roll. It's more about you don't know if you succeeded or failed in a particular situation. For example, an investigation check into this.
Oh, yeah, like bluff and versus like sense motive and Pathfinder, like I'll make them roll that privately to me.
Yeah.
And then like if they're really like, did I really, like, I'll send them a screen cap after the session, like after it's too late, But like no, like those kind of rolls I'll like, basically hide. But
yeah. So in terms of combat encounters, like once you're in an encounter and you're rolling for initiative and you're doing those kinds of things, how do you keep the suspense and horror and dread intact without it feeling like a break in between the suspenseful moments?
Like I said, I'm a bit more of a planner, so I will set up the combat encounters ahead of time and then hide them and then just roll all the initiatives for them and just be like, you see this, it's your turn, like, like you're the first one to react to this, what do you do? Instead of like, okay, give me your initiatives, because that causes the break. But if I go ahead and roll it ahead of time, then I just point to like the person, or not point, but say the name of like, you're the first one to see this, what do you do? Like, that becomes our initiative order, but it doesn't have that pause.
Yeah, I agree. That's honestly really good. Really good. I never thought about using that one, just having that done ahead of time.
Yeah, like, I mean, just planning it a little bit ahead, or even just fucking making it up. Like, honestly, it's worth it to keep that integrity of the moment together versus like, these are the strict mechanics. Like, you know, the first player to gasp after you say a thing. All right, you go first. You were the first one to react.
Um, like one of the things that I used for that was, I like to use the auto roll initiative feature on D&D Beyond because that's how I use my combat trackers.
Yeah,
So as long as everyone's initiative is programmed in there correctly, I can roll everyone's initiative for them behind the scene using their initiative modifier.
yeah,
So I've used that one before in terms of like keeping the moment going. But I agreed, like having it done ahead of time could definitely help with keeping the in the moment going.
yeah. Because like suspense and horror, like kind of, they're harder to maintain because you have to like keep that same sense going. Like the second you let go, like you usually have to build back into it. You know, like we were saying earlier, just to go back, like you have to build that sense of sense and dread. Like just expecting somebody to be right in it right at the moment is like, it's a little bit forced, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So last question before we head into the questions from the audience. How do you handle description in combat when it comes to keeping the suspense? So like describing actions and movements and things like that. How do you translate that from, like it's typical to learn how to like describe heroic or adventure like actions and movements, but how do you change your verbiage to describe it in more of a horror / suspense sense?
For the NPCs or the players?
Well, typically I'm like the kind of lets the PCs describe their own movements.
Yeah,
I
okay.
meant more for like the NPCs.
Oh, just like when a zombie lands a bite attack, like you feel it bite into your forearm, the teeth break the skin, and you feel the blood start to flow, and it starts to itch, and then like just like scratches, like you feel the skin tearing along the side as it separates, and you feel the warmth of your blood on the outside. What else? Those are like the two biggest ones, I guess. And then like any sort of like possessions, it's just like your whole body goes numb and you feel your senses shutting down.
Yeah, I definitely agree into that sensory deprivation one or sensory overload one where it's like whenever I'm describing a suspense moments, I like to hone in on one sense.
Yeah.
And just like overload that one. So, for example, the sense of smell. So, like you feel the zombie lurch at you, and even though it's tearing through your body, all you can smell is the putrid stench of its rotting flesh as it completely envelops you.
Yeah.
So focusing in on one sense, I feel
That's really good. Yeah, that is a really good idea. Yeah.
So let's get into some of the questions from the audience. So the first one we've got is from M, one of my players from Flavored Enemy. When you know your players' fears, how do you feel about using them to help bring in the suspense?
You really gotta check with them first. Like, absolutely get their consent to do that. Do not just, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this because I know they're afraid of spiders. Like, no. Like, check with your players beforehand. Like, hey, is this okay? Like, I want to do this, but if you're not cool with it, like, I won't.
So, it's a dangerous line to walk.
Yeah.
Even with that consent thing set up ahead of time, you got to make sure that you don't overload it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like you have to like you don't want to break it, but like usually you can tell like if they've kind of shut down and they're not talking, like ease off, go somewhere else with it. Like pick on somebody else for a bit. Like don't just keep for lack of a better word, bullying them. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So next question, also from M. How do you feel about adding in elements such as music?
I think that music can help, but I know that there are certain sounds, like there's certain sound waves, like the low end of a tiger's roar and sometimes pipes vibrating. Horror movies will actually use those in the background because it like is a like almost evolutionary trait of like we hear those noises, the hairs on the back of our necks stand up and like we're instantly more tense because we're afraid of lions.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the ambiance stuff as well. You know, like I love using those kinds of stuff. One of the things that I've taken a liking to even more so is heavily reverberated, high pitch nursery rhymes.
Oh yeah, that'll do it.
Um,
Ring around there. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Gets them every
um,
time.
every time, especially when like I worked it in one time with one of my stories where I'd planned this horror slash suspense episode a while in advance, so I worked into the backstory of one of the players, that their character had this sweet nursery rhyme that his mom made for him and wrote it down. I gave him like an audio file with like actually sung so that he kind of like knew what it sounded like,
Yeah.
right? And then when it came time to actually play, I re-recorded the same thing, slowed it way down through a
Chopped and screwed.
reverberation on
Yeah,
there, and then played it with an echo coming from down a deep dark staircase where you couldn't see the end of it.
yeah. That's diabolical, and I love it.
And this was 10 years after his mom had died in
Oh
game.
god. There's they ran into like a cabin in the woods type situation with some incestuous ogres one time, and I really wish that I could have found some just creepy ass banjo music. Like I didn't, but I wanted it. Just like ding 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 ding. It's like yeah.
I just want to confirm you that you, in fact, did say a band of incestuous ogres.
Yes.
Okay, okay, just making sure.
Yeah. No. Hey, yeah, that's horror right there.
Yeah, yeah. Or it's the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Nah. Roll Tide, roll call,
Um,
brother.
so, next question from Trover, one of my other players. Does background description help set up a suspenseful and or jump scare moment?
It definitely can. Like, if you do like sort of just droning on about the descriptions of the room, and then you just get quieter and quieter, and then blah, just like actually like pronunciate like it, because people start to fall into like the lull of somebody slowly talking, like, and then you just like hit them with the here's the thing, and it pops out at you. Like, it can work, but I don't know that I've ever successfully done it. Most of my jump scares are a little more slower paced, I guess, almost. So they're
Yeah,
not quite jump scares, but they still like kind of come out of nowhere, rather.
yeah,
I don't know the
yeah.
right word for this.
I've definitely had a hard time using background description in the full sense of the word to get that jump scare because they're already anticipating something
Yeah,
with that. So one of the things that I do is I get the background description going constantly, keep it going for every single thing.
yeah,
So it just keeps them ready for something and nothing keeps happening. And then during a lull where they're just either looking around or waiting or trying to figure out what to do next, then you hit them.
yeah.
Um, so next question: what is from one of my other players as well? What's the best player death you've caused? And to kind of link this into um, horror and suspense, like how did you get that point across, that dread of this character's dead?
Oh, I think it wasn't a horror. Well, it kind of was a horror moment because they were in a mausoleum, but one of the players got hit by, in Pathfinder, it's called a butchering axe, which is like just a super big orc axe, and it crit him for his entire hit points. Like, and so I just described him running up and this axe hitting his side and everything slowing down and him feeling his ribs crush, and then it slowly going, and then he quit feeling anything as it went through his spine and then went out the other side, and like he just fell apart in front of the party, and I was like, you are permanently dead. Like, just, like, there's no sign of life, there's nothing left, like no gasp, didn't give him dying words, just you're dead.
Yeah, I think that's that utter finality of it. Like
Yeah,
no sweet tender moment at the end or nothing like that. Just bam, you're dead.
yeah,
It can definitely have that huge impact, especially on, hey, we're not playing around no more. Kids' gloves are
yeah,
off.
yeah.
um, So, last question from my other player, Tig Florakis. Feelings on tabletop role-playing games that are designed from the jump for horror. So the first one that comes to mind for me is the Cult of Cthulhu game. If you've ever played that one.
I haven't played it, but everything that I've heard from it is either it's 100% a meme or 100% like psychological trauma. There's no in between with it.
Yeah.
And I think that horror games built from the ground up to be horror games are going to be inherently better just because, like, usually when you approach your players like, hey, I want to play this, like, they're already going to be onboarded for this is the experience. Whereas, like, in, D&D and Pathfinder and other ones, like, you're trying to take them from these heroic moment to you're in it now, like, and that's a lot harder of a like tone shift. It'd be like
Mm.
watching like, I don't know, like, just like like almost sitcom level, like, or just like a prank show, and then suddenly there's just like a super dark zoom in, and like, here's a kid with cancer. Like, it's just like I didn't feel anything because I didn't have any, like, setup for
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, you weren't there. Like you weren't already in the mindset to be affected by that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I definitely agree. That's why I feel like that transition to the suspense and horror type vibe is
it's crucial.
key. Yeah. Um. I think that we're into the end of the suspense and horror stuff. You want to give us a little bit of a breakdown about Frag and kind of what you all do there? So that way we can check you out.
Absolutely. So Frag, known as Full Round Action Gaming, you can find us on Twitch under Full Round Action Gaming. We're primarily Pathfinder First Edition. Thursdays we played through all of the adventure paths for that Paizo published. So it's pre-written stuff, but we do our own takes on it. We change it up. And then Wednesday is run by me. It is completely homebrewed, and that's called the Last Hopers, which is, like I said, the kind of suicide-esque or Suicide Squad-esque powerful wizard, and brings you into service and says go do good things even though you're a bad person. Um, but yeah, like, I don't know. I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and then you can go check out Flavored Enemy on Spotify and wherever else you got your podcasts. We have currently we finished or finishing wrapping Flavored Enemy: The King's Call, which is our first campaign. Flavored Enemy: Tales of Vittore has just released its first episode, and the second episode's getting ready to come out here soon. And then we also have Flavored Enemy: Scourge of Stars, which is a Star Wars Fantasy Flight game series, which will be coming out in July. And then, like you're listening to right now, Flavored Enemy Behind the Screens, which talks about like DMing tips and stuff like that. So you can check us out anywhere you got podcasts, or you can join us on Discord for the live stuff. Well, thanks for coming, Cam, and
Thank you for having me. It was a blast.
look forward to hearing more about incestuous orc bands.
No, not orcs, ogres.
Oh, incestuous ogre
Yeah,
bands.
it's a crucial difference.